Welcome to Philly Coco presents Side Project Spotlight, episode 55. This is developers' journey into making cool stuff. I'm Kotaro.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Aaron.
And we are Philly Coco, a Philadelphia-based Coco Heads community focused on Apple development that primarily, but not exclusively, means iOS, Mac, tvOS, watchOS, and visionOS development. Philly Coco's two desires to take you higher on your own developer journey. Oh, no.
We could do multiple takes, but we just choose not to.
No, I
fix it in post.
no, not even.
I could try to fix it in post. I don't have your voice generated. I was using the script tool for the last couple episodes. So technically I think I could do it.
I was like, oh, I'm making progress, and then I just bluffed at the end. It always happens, but whatever.
Yeah, it's okay. What are we actually talking about today?
Well, today I was kind of interested in this idea of kind of like right now, I think all three of us are sort of in not quite a decisive, particular concrete project that we all want to work on. And I think part of it is sort of our uncertainties about the sort of the technical range of the visionOS. You don't have the hardware, so you really can't experience, the simulator can only do so much. And you don't have you don't really have a really proper feel of what this could potentially can do as a platform. Realistically,
without the hardware, it's kind of hard to
I don't expect it to jump out of the 3D plane, for example, in the simulator.
Yeah, so like we were saying before the show, without hardware, it's kind of hard to build anything really interesting. I know people are building interesting stuff, or at least theoretically, but for us, it's like without the hardware, maybe we talk about making more sense to have some kind of existing app that you kind of ported to it first, but then we need something to port. So
you could go to the developer lab, but that's a pretty slow iteration cycle. Of every time you want to test, you got to make an appointment, however long that takes, and test once a month at most, probably.
Yeah, and people are doing a lot of interesting demos. It looks like, I can't tell sometimes, the demos I see online, are they demos of people that actually wrote code, or are they just visual demos they just made?
Oh, yeah. There are some of them. You have to be careful because there are some of them that are high in the sky ideas.
Okay, yeah.
They do a great job, whatever tool they're using, whether it's the After Effects or something. Sometimes you can tell because they might do a gesture interaction that doesn't make sense in visionOS.
Right.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying, I saw one that was, it might have been real, or it might have been After Effects. It was particle effects coming out of the window in visionOS. That could have been real.
That is possible.
Yeah,
that's real.
And that was it was like a video game or something, I guess, and it was really kind of cool.
It was a video game done in SpriteKit, so the window pane itself is in the TV screen. But what they did is as it's one of those bullet hell games.
Right.
Like if you played Gradius or Life Force or any of those types of R-Type.
Oh yeah, I did.
You would know what I'm talking about.
I played them.
but one of the things is sometimes you get a bad guy that will shoot bazillions of bullets, everywhere, in 5 different directions. And so in this case, it comes out of the screen and kind of goes into your living room, so to speak. Doesn't make any practical sense from any real use case, but it's an interesting demo of trying to break the fourth wall, if you will.
Right. So people are building things, I guess is my point. We could go down that avenue,
sure,
where we're just trying to mess around with stuff like that in the simulator. But I mean, I'm not really skilled in that area of development right now.
So one of the reasons, for me at least, why I was messing around and kind of gone down a sort of a metal shader rabbit hole.
Right.
So people who haven't listened to the last podcast or two, metal shaders in iOS 17 are a lot easier to implement or integrate into your SwiftUI layout. It's just a modifier. You can have 3 variations: color effect, distortion effect, and layer effect. They all do something slightly different, but all ultimately do something that will sort of manipulate the view and on a pixel level. So you can do effects that you would only assume you can only do in video games. So
right.
pixelation effects, warping effects that will like completely warp your view, and animate those warp views. So like your linear algebra and your trigonometry skills are going to be much more required for this kind of like to do deeper, more complex shaders that are just basically more complex than party tricks per se. But you can get effects that can create fantastic animations and then also utilize them to make more engaging, immersive transitions.
Yeah. And so I guess bringing this up, we've been kind of thinking about the direction of user interface, I guess, for lack of a better word. Like, for the near future and the farther future, we have the ability now to do, as you said, like use shaders in our SwiftUI apps we talked about briefly. But beyond that, we also have this last year, and we talked about several times, about the so-called AI revolution going on here. But specifically, we have like generative AI and we have large language models, which allow for I guess for the first time, an actual realistic chance at having the quote unquote universal interface. I think I've seen people talk about this, of just talking to your device or just typing in natural language queries and having it do stuff, which is the dream of all of us that watch Star Trek: The Next Generation, right? There's like a computer, blah, blah, blah. And then you'd have a conversation with the computer and it would just do things for you. And so the idea that, I don't think you're not going to not have apps to do stuff anymore, anytime soon, but you're going to have, I think both, if you watch the OpenAI keynote, they have their own kind of app store kind of thing coming. But then you also have the fact that these technologies are being more and more integrated. And how is that going to change the experience of using stuff, specifically on the Apple platforms? That's where we are, when you have this universal language availability, especially when Apple starts rolling it out on their own systems. And then even beyond that, we have the shader stuff for visual things. We have this natural language interface. We have like generative image stuff. And then we have things like the Hu.ma.ne, I guess that's how you pronounce it, Hu.ma.ne AI pin release, which I think we could talk about a bit, which I think gives a glimpse at how it's like a very 1.0-ish Watch It 1.0 thing, but it's like it kind of gives a glimpse of a lot of ideas about if you have a universal interface like that, how can apps kind of change, how can your experience of using software change. So I thought we basically want to just talk about that stuff today a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit roundabout, but it's kind of a roundabout subject because things are in flux.
Sure.
Right.
I mean,
I was trying to create like a theme for people listening. I don't know if I'm doing a good job.
I mean, I was thinking about it now that you mentioned it. I was like, I think you slightly mentioned Star Trek, and I was like, oh, was that the inspiration for the Hu.ma.ne badge or clip or whatever we're calling it, right? Because like it's on your shoulder or on your it's a clip on your side, on your chest or whatever that you tap on or you double tap on depending on context, right? And then you make your verbal request, but it is like I think in Star Trek you still have to tap on your badge, right?
Well, they were kind of inconsistent about it, but yeah, I mean the idea of the next gen universe.
It's like because like Picard would always go like he will tap on his badge and be like computer, whatever. Give me the stats. Give me the stats on whatever.
Yeah, they would usually do that, and then they wouldn't always tap it again. It always bothered me as a kid. They wouldn't tap it again to end the call. I was like, how does a computer know to stop responding? Like, to it. But yeah,
you're the sci-fi geek. You would know this.
No, actually, Star Trek is one of those things that I never really got into. So,
oh my god.
No
okay. Well, what's your impression? Because my understanding from a technical standpoint of the Hu.ma.ne device is that it's actually a smartphone under the hood.
Kind of. It's got like a decent level.
It's Android under the hood.
Android processor, but I'm not too familiar with those things. But it's like basically as much as like a decent Android phone. It's like $700 or something. So it's got to do some level of on-device processing.
Did you guys watch the Hu.ma.ne movie, the video?
Only bits and pieces. I actually intended to watch the whole thing.
Oh, I watched it. I watched the whole thing.
It every time I watched it felt very dry.
It's not a good presentation. I will say.
I read some summaries of it. So, and I've been like following this company for a while since before they announced. So because they were posting jobs when I was like looking
cool
for jobs.
So I will say the presentation is it's a terribly put together video. There's background noise. The presenters are so low energy. I actually thought they were depressed or something when they were coming in. Like I didn't understand what was happening. But that's just them probably not being very good at making YouTube videos, whatever. It still baffles me that they made such a poorly constructed video, but whatever. The things they actually demonstrate are more important than the packaging of it, I think, for our discussion. And because if we're already started talking about Hu.ma.ne, we might as well continue here. It's like the current like state of the art of universal interface being natural language. In this case, specifically natural language of voice. Although it does have some other interaction modalities, like you can do some gestures in front of it with your hand, like visionOS. You can display some kind of quote unquote screen on your hand, and you can tap it to do things as well. But it's mostly voice activated, is what it looks like from the demos, and so, it's kind of interesting.
Right. Oh, go ahead.
No, just the thing of have they solved the thing of how often are you going to be interacting with your voice, or it's more the thing of how often are you by yourself, because it's like, like in your office, or you're in an open office environment, or in the train station. It's like, are you really going to be like shouting into your computer that's attached to your shirt?
Have you not seen people walking around in public just blaring music or having conversations on speakerphone?
Do you want to be that guy?
No, I don't want to be that guy. Well, okay. That's something that came to my mind. Like, how often are you going to be talking to it? But if you imagine this technology, but integrated into like an Apple Watch, then I think it makes more sense to me.
My understanding about that was, okay, so you're going to have your earphones on. Most likely, it's integrated with it will integrate with your phone. To be fair, like,
but still, then you're talking to yourself.
Yeah, then it's even worse because you can't hear the other end of the conversation from the computer. But you can have that.
I mean, the problem like we all have with Siri is like you can't trust her or him to provide you with whatever, the answer of what you need at the moment of time, right? Like, and so like half the time I don't even bother. And how do I feel comfortable enough that, like, because I've already had the PTSD of that experience, like, why am I going to trust some, if Apple can't do it, $1 trillion company, what's my hope? Even in Microsoft, even any of them.
Google's done a lot better job with the assistant interface.
Right? Even Google, right? I don't see anybody going gaga over like, hey, I'm doing all these like voice commands when I'm listening to like people, when I experience Alexa, right? When I experience people like check how cool this is, right? Even Alexa takes a good 3 to 5 seconds to register what you've said, and then if you said it right, do the proper thing. Hey, Alexa, turn on my lights at 50%, right? Like, maybe you'll get it the first time. Like, I feel like it's like a 60 to 70% success ratio, judging from anecdotally.
These tools we've had up until the large language model revolution, to go with the hype masters. Until this point, there was a lot less accuracy, I guess, in its generated responses and its understanding. I think we do have better tools now for responses for sure, but I think better tools for even kind of parsing human language in a way with these models. But the hard part, of course, is hooking them into tools that do stuff. In the Hu.ma.ne the pin demo, the stuff works pretty well in their demo, but as you say, who knows how reliable it's going to be in the back end. And OpenAI had their own thing recently, their own presentation, where they talked about how they're evolving their hook the language model into actual tools technology. And so, but everyone's moving in that direction. My point is kind of think about this as the universal user interface is being able to talk to your computer, being able to do like passive gestures to computer like visionOS. Like, I think it's more than just voice. To me, like a universal UI is the computer passively being able to just respond to you in context in the modality that you're trying to interact with it best at that moment, and less about I'm going to activate a specific app with a specific like user interface, like that just to tap some menus or something. Like the user interface on your screen is going to be task specific, more or less in my mind. So and then you might activate it, or you might switch that modality while you're in the process of doing other things. So if you're in visionOS, you're doing things maybe with your hands a little bit. You're walking around, maybe you're doing things are popping up on your watch at the appropriate time in your field of view. If you have AR glasses, then you're going to just say things occasionally, and it's going to work. Like, we see this evolution of we see it from on the Apple side. To make it concrete, you see how I'm not going to say the name of the product, but the trigger words have evolved for hey dingus.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? I don't. So that now you don't need to see "hey" in front of it, and eventually it's just going to be like the humane pin, where I don't think there was any trigger word for that. It just kind of right. I don't think there was, although you could trigger it with the badge tap.
Yeah, I think it
was a little unclear to me. It's a little unclear if you had to tap it, or if it would, because they said it wasn't passively listening. It was a little confusing. But if it's not passively listening, then you'd have to do something to make it work, right? But you see what, in my mind, I just see evidence of this convergence at an industry level now of, and we talked about this before with widgets and things, of just trying to, the app is still there, I think. Right. It's now the app is trying to accomplish a task, and the way you interact with it and the modalities you interact with it are now dispersed in your life across devices, in different, depending on the different scenarios you find yourself in, the places and you find yourself in real life, and it's more of we're increasingly more of, I think, a natural human like interface to our software. Like, we're evolving towards that Star Trek Next Generation future that Aaron is sadly ignorant of, oblivious of. but we grew up watching.
Give me back your sci-fi nerd card, please.
I never claimed.
No, it's okay. But if you probably just through osmosis absorb some of this, but there's excellent examples in Next Generation of this idea where they just say computer and they do things, but they have conversations with the computer where it's kind of like a very advanced form of the LM conversations that people dream about, where you start having a conversation about, I'm going to analyze this data with my computer. They'll do this in Star Trek. Like, data will be sitting there and be like, okay, we got this sensor data, and then they'll say to the computer some gobbledygook technobabble to the computer, and the computer will just like on the fly figure out how to change the model that was used, and then change the display, and like analyze the data differently, and it just does it in like real time in a conversation, and you're not explicitly telling the computer how to do anything. You're just like declarative UI. You're just saying, I like figure this out, and it just does it. That's the kind of future that OpenAI, I think, is moving towards.
The question is how many years away is that? Because,
I don't think it's tomorrow or anything.
No, not tomorrow. But just because, or even just when is it going to be more, easy and convenient to do a simple task with your voice rather than just, this is faster to just pick up my phone.
Well,
yes. I mean, I think the voice thing is maybe overhyped a bit now, in the sense of everything always being done by voice. But I think as being part
text, you're going to sit there and like type stuff to this chat thing rather than just like move your mouse. You're already at your computer. Then it's like, are you going to sit there and type stuff? Or are you going to go click on what you want?
In my view, I think you're absolutely right. I think that it depends on the task you're trying to do. And I think in my imaginings, you still have custom UIs and stuff. It's just that some of the stuff you could just do without. Some of the, like the boilerplate UI, you might not need as much anymore, because you would just ask for stuff, and then like the UI that you would want, like maybe be more concrete. Like if you were having an app and you wanted to you want to like, example is like the Photoshop generative AI kind of stuff where you're still interacting with a standard GUI because that makes sense. You're drawing, maybe using a tablet or a mouse or your fingers. You're drawing on your tablet. You're doing things or on your computer, and then you want to change something in the background, like I think Lightroom, Photoshop, that have things. Where you like, okay, I'm gonna circle this with my pen or my Apple, my Apple Pencil. I circle this area, and then you could just say to the computer, remove this area of the background or remove that bench that's here. And then that kind of natural language interface would allow you to more smoothly activate that feature. And right now in Photoshop, you can like circle things and you could type into a little text box and be like, generate, like make me like a tree or something. And it'll pop up, a generative thing, image to put in there. So like they are already merging these things. And right now it's typing into a text box, but I imagine you'd be able to also just do it voice wise too if you wanted to. Either way, that's in my mind what I'm thinking about. It's just like smoothing over the edges of that stuff, being able to like link together more complicated pipelines of functionality without having to explicitly click a whole bunch of buttons all the time or, write a whole bunch of code.
I mean, there is something to be said about having, once you can kind of get past the trust threshold of any of these models, right? Where you might go, let's say if you're into stocks, you might go, give me the best, the top 10 dividend stocks with a dividend yield of, 2.3% or above for this year, right? And then you go, okay, out of all these, what are the ones that are most considered blue chips and stable and maybe that I can afford?
You could probably do a lot of that now. Like you could take, if you had a list of stock, like you could at least put the file into ChatGPT and have it sort stuff for you. And
right.
Then,
but I would ask it to basically do deeper analysis on all the stocks to give me something a little more stable for when I decide on buying,
I think what you're getting at is like, can you trust the output of that if it's not just going to generate some stock that doesn't exist? Or
exactly.
Sure.
So
this is where I was prefixing all of this with like once you get past the trust threshold.
That specifically is related to LLMs. They say in the lingo of the tools is hallucinate. I mean they're because again they're token predictors, so you put a big prompt in, and sometimes it just generates what logically kind of statistically makes sense in there, but it's just not actually real. This is a huge problem for LLMs that may or may not have any kind of overall solution. But what you're describing might be more feasible now than even last year because OpenAI is like literally moving their product into this realm where you can create little customized, they call them GPTs, but a little customized interface to the model where you can kind of fine tune it with data that you put in, and also it can have access to the outside world to do things. And then you can have they have an API, but also have like a conversational chat interface for building one of these things that they demoed. And then that can be like, you could have like a stock analysis GPT, for instance, and then you can and it's geared towards and has the data set necessary to help you answer those questions. That's the idea.
I guess for something like that, it's like you want it to have been validated that it's going to give you accurate results, but because it's, with the OpenAI ChatGPT stuff, they kind of shot themselves in the foot by bringing this out and make it, now everybody knows it's like, oh, this stuff is not accurate. And it was kind of too early. They're trying to do this 100% GPT pipeline of, well, it's just going to know everything. And it's just like, no, you actually have to connect it to stuff with valid data. It can't generate everything.
Exactly. And that's what OpenAI do. So they had the, what did they call it before, the apps or something they had them in there, or no, plugins. And now they're evolving that into, instead of building like a plugin and then in the main like chat interface, you like activate a plugin or something. Now it's just like you kind of wrap up the plugin in an interface of ChatGPT, a conversational, chat. So you just go to the GPT that's about the plugin that you want to use. And they showed some demos in their recent talk, which is pretty cool. And they also made one on stage that was I think it was about like giving advice to startup advice to developers, like questions. So the example was the founder of OpenAI. His name escapes me at the moment. The head of it. He's saying, I get asked. I talk to developers. I get asked questions about the same kind of questions a lot. So he started creating a little GPT to help with this kind of thing, and he took a transcript of a talk he did about the subject and uploaded that into the system, and that became the source that GPT used when it was generating answers. So it generated answers that were basically things that he had said, and that makes it more accurate in that respect. Accurate in quotes in that respect, because if the goal was to say, I want a GPT that provides answers like I would provide answers based upon my actual answers in things that I wrote, and here's the things I wrote. You know what I mean? You're trying to push the output of the model to use the actual correct information you have. But of course, something more complicated like analyzing, predicting like the future stock performance or something, that's not really, I think, what an LLM does. It doesn't do analysis like that. It's like I don't even know how you describe that to a human being. Like it's not very easy to describe it. You might have picked something too big. Maybe like
one of the things that does sort of fascinate now that you mentioned it is this idea of a pipeline, right? Like the generic example would be like, okay, like you ask a ChatGPT, and I'm sure they do this now, where it's like it's just a simple calculator question. What is 237 times 565, it probably immediately knows, you're asking me a math question, send it to just a simple calculator program that will give the answer back 10, exponentially faster, right? Versus like an LLM that has to sort of like statistically guess if that question was ever asked, right? So when you have something that has much more concrete answers, you can kind of send it to a different program.
Like Wolfram Alpha is integrated. Like you can get accurate answers now.
So from that standpoint, right, like imagine the ecosystem becomes much more of a pipeline system. Because one of the things that I thought was kind of funny about this, I guess their OpenAI's sort of proposal as an app store, opportunity as an app store, right, where the custom GPTs, right, you can make your own custom GPTs. It's kind of like a secret, like, you're gonna do the work for us, basically, and maybe we'll revenue share it. Very nebulously said, well, we'll revenue share somehow.
We talked about this before, where specifically with LLMs, these are going to be increasingly integrated into all the kinds of applications we use on our desktops, on our mobile devices, on the web. And it's very, very expensive to run one of these giant generalized models, but it's a lot cheaper to run specialized models. And it feels like the GPTs concept that OpenAI is doing is kind of like in between, because it still uses their gigantic model, but now they're trying to make it easier for you to fine tune it and plug it into like a pipeline, like to do things. They had it's another approach to trying to get this technology into a more useful, specific scenario for you, because I think they realize that a giant LLM, like there's only so much you can do by ramping it up. I know some people believe that if you just throw more computing and more data at it, that it just continues to get better. But that's not.
That's where
that's not true.
People got lost in that. And it was like, this output is so good, we could just do 100% GPT everything.
Yeah, it's plausible sounding, grammatically mostly correct.
But whatever.
Text,
they're finally moving towards a thing of it's an interface. It's not. It shouldn't have ever been thought of as something that's going to do anything but generate text. Not going to like give you accurate answers on anything without feeding into some other database of something that can handle that.
Yeah, the conflation. We're calling it AI is, I think, again, that is the worst name ever for something, because it's conflating what you're saying, an interface with some kind of so-called intelligence that is actually coming up with solutions to problems.
And hopefully it can be evolved to this thing that's like, it's a very good dispatcher of things to pick out all these tools. And
that's what I'm thinking of. And Hu.ma.ne has that in their AI pin demo. That's what they're saying you can do. Like you can just kind of ask it do things. One of the things that was really cool in there that is a great use of LLMs, as I think is all this technology, was the translation thing, where it was able to pick up. They said I think it could pick up the language that was being spoken, so so it could switch automatically. And then it was just probably one of the smoothest translation interface I've ever seen, because all you had to do is like tap the pin and then say something, and then it would spit it back out like a universal translator on Star Trek. You would imagine that might work, but slower.
That would be the one thing that I sort of assume, like particularly with visionOS or the Vision Pro. If that's not there, I would say I don't want to throw hyperboles there, but if that's not there in day one, as like somebody comes in and they speak French, and you have subtitles on as a feature, not even accessibility. You just be like, okay, I just want subtitles on. We can have like a balloon or something come up with what they actually said in AR, and it would track based on their positioning, and that would be easy for them to do. Like it would not.
Like Google has just for YouTube, they have a generate subtitles thing, which it works better and better because I think it's built on some model like this, and they keep training it. Maybe
they've improved it, but I remember trying to use it on some videos, and it was just like a lot of gibberish. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's gotten a lot better. That's my point. Yeah. These things like
get
it was
better.
Above the level of a grade schooler, then it was it didn't know how to translate it.
But the idea though of this being more of an interface, I think you're absolutely right, Aaron, and that's where I am in my head too. Like this is one part of it. This is the glue that lets you put together these complicated pipelines of functionality that are otherwise kind of difficult for people to navigate. That's I
guess the thing is, without the magic of, this is like some kind of actual intelligence, this language model is actually intelligent, then you still have to do a lot of development work to make this work.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's what
people were like, this thing is so good, you could just, put, a trillion parameters, and then it'll rule the world or something.
It'll spit out your apps for you.
You still got to actually connect the correct tool for it to actually use and make it be able to interface with the language model so it can spit you back out an answer.
That leads me into the GitHub presentation on that they just had recently, GitHub Universe, because we're talking about universal UI for like end users. The universal UI for developers has already been changing. Like a lot of people use GPT now and similar system, or Copilot from GitHub. But what they demoed at the GitHub event was an evolution of that to make it even more, as I'm saying, like integrated into your workflow more seamlessly. So I don't know if you guys watched any of the GitHub Universe presentation.
No, I did not.
We prepare really well for this podcast. Yeah. So I watched it, and there was some cool stuff in there, and also some cringe things because it's tech conference live demos. But their idea is essentially it's an evolution. They have this LLM. LLMs are good at generating boilerplate types of code and explaining kind of code because they have all these examples they have from GitHub. Let's not get into whether that was okay or not.
Let's ignore the copyright.
Ignore the copyright issues. But they have this but they're going to integrate everywhere. So like you'll be able to go to github.com, for instance, is one example. And as part of your normal workflow, we go to GitHub a lot, for instance. Like you go look at an open source project. Now you can download the code now and you can run it through an LLM, but what you'll be able to do is just go to GitHub, go to the repo, look at some code, be like, select it, and then hit a button and say, explain this to me in a little chat box, and then you'll get an explanation of the code. You can do things like it'll generate some documentation for you. They did a demo of generating unit tests. It was an extremely lame unit test that I don't think was that useful, but it did it. And so that kind of thing, and it'll generate.
What's funny is like, I've done that. I've asked ChatGPT to give me
explain something. Or give you a test.
Not explain. Well, sometimes I ask it to explain it, but I also ask it to, I don't want to write this unit test. You do it for me.
Yeah. I mean, they're pushing this. Their marketing message of this is that it's like providing an expert that's always there to answer your questions. And specifically, they go into a demo where they use your company's data. Like they have a way for you to if you're an enterprise, to have access to this. So you could have your documentations and your code base and everything be in here, and then you could ask questions. They did this with their own code. So they had a demo where they're like, how do I make a link shorten this link? And if you just ask the Copilot normally, I think it would just give you a bit.ly link. But then they're like, well, we have our own internal link shortener. So then he logged in as himself and logged into his GitHub company account, and then asked the same thing on a particular Copilot instance. I think that had their own code base in it. So then he asked it again, and then it gave him the answer with the GitHub specific code and an explanation of like how to set it up and everything, because it had access to the code and I guess the documentation and stuff around the code. So it was able to generate instructions that were specifically tailored to the company. And so their marketing is, okay, now you can be developer in company, big company A. Well, now it's like you have a senior developer kind of there to answer your questions whatever you're doing in whatever context you're doing, which is the thing that I'm talking about from a UI perspective. In your editor, on the website, talking, just typing in conversationally, selecting things and doing shortcuts to activate stuff. Whatever context you're in, you can activate the tools, and it's just more seamless than it was in the first version, according to the demos I saw.
Can I ask for every username in my company account or every API that's exposed in a security risk?
Actually, yes. They have an AI-powered security tool they're rolling out where they already have a scanning system that can scan for certain kinds of known patterns, right? So now what they're going to do is use the LLM system to look for things that are not known patterns. So specifically, they said, like, I guess, passwords in your source code repo,
Yeah.
So it'll be able to find these things, and you can then also give it patterns to look for in your system. And so they're integrating this in there, and now I don't know how they have it implemented. They promise it's all private and stuff, I guess, but it's that's the thing. What do you trust that? I mean, it's Microsoft. I mean, Microsoft is actually really good at doing enterprise level stuff, and but yeah, it's well, so yeah, this is the thing. Like they're showing a world where the universal AI for developers is better. I agree, but if I'm big company, I'm big co. I'm like, do I trust them enough? I don't know. If I'm paying for enterprise GitHub, I probably trust them somewhat.
It goes back to like you don't lose your job for Microsoft.
Well,
right?
I mean, but
then even back in the day, IBM.
But to your point about how the smaller, like, I think Apple's going to go in a different direction where they're going to say more of this stuff's going to run locally than in the cloud. Mm-hmm. But because the stuff is only to be useful has to be these giant models right now, and they have to run on huge server farms and stuff. It looks like the companies are all trying to find ways of making it work for you at a smaller level, but they have to still use their giant hardware farm.
So here's my sort of pseudo reservation about the whole thing, because it kind of harkens back to like, when you're making your own website or web app or SaaS product, you still relying on, say, an AWS server or some kind of backend that you pay server costs or whatever, and server services within that server cost of whatever AW cloud stuff that you're doing, whether it be S3 buckets, messaging, a microservice, whatever, right? Like that all makes sense to me. In the sense, this is sort of like an extension of that sort of like kind of product, right? Of like, okay, this is just another back end product that you're going to be utilizing, and in this case, it's sort of
$39 a month per user.
Is that the cost?
That's what I was going to ask. How much do they charge for this?
One of the things, one of the quotes was like 30. I don't know if that's the most expensive thing, but one of them was like something like $39 per user.
And honestly, that's tremendously fair. I'm not complaining about that, but I'm a cheap local developer, indie developer in my mind, right? So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay,
for you it's $10 a month.
For me, it's like 7. Below 10, it'd be 5.
No, I mean right now it's $10 a month for most of the Copilot stuff.
Oh, gotcha.
That price is not changing,
right?
For individuals.
So I'm trying to think of like, well, what are the things that I can take advantage of now in a model that is useful it's not magic. Sometimes the people get caught up in like the more spectacular fireworks of
No. There was a great demo of exactly this, what you're thinking of. Like, how do I use this today? And so the demo was building like this little website that would show your earliest commit. If you put a username in, it's actually a real live website. I'll try to find the link. During the demo, there was like one part where it was getting a query to like a REST query, like a URL with query strings on it, okay? And generating that with the LLM, and then asking it to modify it in place in a couple different ways. They were demonstrating how to do it, and one of them was like a little conversation with saying, "Hey, I want to be able to sort this," and the demoer was like, "I don't always remember, how to do the sort. Which way makes it like earliest to latest? Is it And so you just ask it in natural language. It was like, can you make this sort from earliest to latest date or something like that? And then it came back with like ASC, I think was the sorting, the ascending. So the demoer was like, I don't remember ascending versus descending, what that means. So you were able to just, and that's actually a good example of a day-to-day kind of thing where sometimes you're like, I don't quite remember how to do this, or I don't quite remember this specific API, or it's like, you're like, can you just tell me how to do it and just write the code for me for this little tiny snippet of thing, and it works. And that was actually, I thought it was probably one of the best examples of our whole demo was just that one little thing. Like, I just need this one line changed. Maybe it's because I have actually had that experience of like, do I need to make this ascending or descending? And then like sorting issues come up all the time. You're like, and you have to puzzle through them sometimes if you don't, do it a lot. Also, regular expression generation, I can imagine, would be useful too for this kind of thing. Yeah, I think we
tried that. We tried it at work the other day, and I was like, "Are you sure you can trust this?"
No, you have to verify stuff, and I think that's why if it's a small thing like generating the query strings for a well-known API that's in the model, then okay, you could easily verify that. That's fine. If you're going to do a regular expression, I mean, there are ways you verify with data set afterwards. Like there's stuff you could do.
I mean, I would be fascinated to see if you, and it's probably already works in like Copilot or something like that, where you can just hand Copilot a regular expression, like a complex regular expression, that says, "Tell me what this does."
Oh yeah, I don't know. Maybe I haven't actually got to use Copilot myself. I'm thinking because I'm mostly in Xcode and it doesn't support it.
Is it on? Isn't there like a free trial you can do now?
Yeah, I think so. But I guess my point is like most of the code I'm working on lately is Swift and Xcode, and it's really awkward to try to. It doesn't have native support for that. Right. So I think there's some community project that kind of brought in GPT anyway. I don't know if it brought in Copilot, but Copilot is in everything else.
I think it's in Copilot, but you'd have to use like VS Code.
Yeah, you have to use VS Code, which I'm not going to use VS Code right now. So I'm doing SwiftUI stuff. Like it's hard. Xcode is a hard enough time. But
be a little tricky.
But the universal UI for developers is, as you said, I think it's more clear there maybe for us mentally to think about. We have pipelines, we have multiple tools we use, we screw them together. In the past and even today, you have a lot of command line tools, like Unix style tools. You have that universal interface is a file. You can pipe things between them to build up larger tools. Part of what these new AI natural language stuff lets you do is while I'm in the context of working in my IDE, I can quickly get this little bit of source code modified, so that the sorting algorithm works. The sorting is the right direction, and I can ask it a question, and because it's hooked into my source code repo, it can tell me how to use this API that some other developer made. Like that kind of thing real quick. Or it can be like, I need you to insert, this particular API that we have, do this. And then you verify it like you would any other code. But it becomes, I think, more of a different kind of developer experience a little bit.
I guess I'm kind of curious about at some point, which I'm sure already exists, you can build something that will do the actual work, right? As opposed to just give you the code and the instructions of where to put it, right?
GitHub has you covered. Did you sure you didn't watch this because they
I
actually
did not watch this.
their goal
Otherwise I wouldn't bring it up.
No, their goal I think is to have like everything, including like deployment and stuff, eventually be part of this. Let's see, did they do? Yeah, because they want you to. It's not just code. I think they want everything eventually to be automated. They want to automate the entire development chain with this stuff.
And lock you into their services. Forever.
Yes, exactly. So.
Of course, everything is about lock-in. It's about building moats. Okay, that's how it works in this corporate business.
Right. So, I guess that brings us to Apple. Back to Apple here. Apple is the outlier here. They do not have a very good story for universal natural language interfaces with dingus. I can't even say the name anymore because itself is a trigger word now, and we don't. And speaking of trusting and not trusting things, I don't exactly trust the trigger. That sometimes the Siri.
Is that a strictly iOS 17 thing?
Yeah, and HomePods.
Okay.
But anyway, so Siri is not that great at doing this kind of thing. It didn't activate though. It's good. So they don't have a great story for that. They have basically nothing in the developer tool chain right now. There's a lot of rumors that they are building stuff for Dub, for next Dub, but it's also Apple, so they're not going to do what everybody else does with some. They're gonna. I don't think they can avoid doing some stuff in the cloud, but it's Apple. They're going to be pushing the idea of doing things on device. I think pushing privacy, that kind of thing as an angle. So what do you think is going to happen there? Or what would you like them to do?
Build some like actually optimized, useful model that isn't just ridiculously over parameterized with too much stuff and still doesn't really work. So I don't know what they're going to do for their data set of it's going to how they're going to collect data to get this thing to work without it being just this huge web scraping thing.
Yeah, well, they open sourced Swift, the language, right? So they have that. They have SwiftUI is not open source, right? So they have their own repo of somewhere of that stuff, right? They could use for training.
I guess if you're looking for, I think Apple tends to be a little more subtle. Like if anything, like they already have AI in some form of capacity in most of their products in some capacity, whether it be the text, the keyboard, autocomplete now, the object detection for photos, even Siri to a certain degree was in some level AI. It could be improved at this point to be a little more up to date. I assume that's going to whatever next version of Siri will be based on some kind of LLM.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
On the back end. Yeah, and then I think because they have all those neural engines that constantly get updated and improved over time, like they're already, from a hardware point of view, they're already positioned to have
if you have a small
product that is
small focus model
or models.
So from the universal UI perspective, from a normal end user, I think we'll see as early as next Dub improved Siri dramatically. So if you can improve the natural language processing of it in order to trigger your own app intents, that alone would make a voice interface into your applications far more useful than it is now, where you can kind of do it, but no one ever trusts the system to work. And then I think that would be the main thing. They already are offering like different kinds of generative image stuff to a degree in there. Like you can tap and hold and pop something out of the background, but they'll add more of that. I think they're going to add, they'll probably add stuff to mail and things like that. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised because that's in Google's been doing that. Microsoft's been doing that where it can kind of generate messages for you. And
I think you see much more of the magical stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of thing. Yeah, but it'll be on the
visionOS side of thing.
Oh, okay. You think it'll be focused more on vision? Yeah.
Because I think I'm thinking like when we talk about,
I'm not so sure though. I'm not so sure.
Well, in the sense of like you would to understand, like for example, object detection, or was it scene? Was it scene recognition or whatever? Understanding its surroundings much better. as well as, let's say, voice translation or even voice to text.
Yeah, it's going to be on iPhone.
It kind of already
now.
has that. Yeah, but now it would make much more sense from a Vision Pro point of view.
I mean, yeah, but they're not going to roll out stuff that's exclusively the visionOS. It's going to be an iPhone. iPhones with, and then that it'll roll into visionOS either simultaneously.
I think what you're saying is that because it's much more aware of the spatial context of things, because you're wearing it, but it's just kind of locked to, this room or something that you're in, and but because. To take out your phone and like scan the room so it has a context of what you're doing. I don't know if they're going to start doing that passively if they have enough. They don't have the extra what is it called? The motion processor. There's the extra motion processor in the Vision Pro that's doing that in real time all the time. So that will it'll drain your iPhone's battery. So probably
the way I'm looking at it is there are different models doing different things. It's not all just relying on one glob of a model.
It's a system of models, and that I saw some blog entry or something. I think it was from a company that made some product, but whatever they were. I think I put it in the Slack, and it was like, how do you make AI stuff? And they basically said exactly what you were saying before, Aaron. You can't have just one giant model that does everything. You need to focus on in your application on the area where something like an LLM or some other generative AI system model will do the job better than you can through other techniques, and then plug it in there, and you do all the massive amount of work to make a highly focused, like properly trained model that just does that one thing, and you have to glue all that stuff together. So you're not creating. It's not something that can be easily copied because you've created your own app. It does its own unique things, and you've done your own models, even if you built them on top of existing ones, but you built your own system of models and regular code, for lack of a better word, that works together. That is the future, and we haven't really talked too much about that. That might be a good discussion to have someday when we're more familiar with it, like the architectural style of doing that kind of thing. I'm thinking in terms of, for this episode, just more about the developer experience, user interface, and the experience of end users when this stuff when this stuff works. Because in that example, that blog post, I gotta find it. It was I think it took like a Figma design or something and generated into like a website design or something like that. It was some service like that, and it was pretty cool. But they did not use just one giant LM. That would not have worked.
Right. I mean, it's just secret sauce, right? Like at the end of the day, it's like all restaurants have their secret mix of spices or whatever to make whatever their dish is unique. This is the secret sauce or secret ingredient.
Yeah, and for Apple, I mean, besides I think Siri getting better and visionOS, I think visionOS eventually will, instead of having as many like right now, it seems like the interface is your eye looks at things and then you use like gestures to activate stuff. But if you have better natural language interfaces that are running and visual identification models running, then you could probably just do more things like look at and just say something, and have it activate. But and as a developer side, I think we will get something like Copilot, but I don't know what they're going to call it.
Right.
I think it's called Duo on GitLab. They have their own thing. Okay. It's called like Duo. I'm like, maybe they'll just call it Siri. No, they couldn't do that.
Just call it Dingus.
Dingus. It's called Dingus.
And then screw up everybody's
How do I make this? Yeah, Dingus. How do I make this core data stack?
All right. Well, I think we should probably wrap it up today. You can learn more about Philly Cocoa at phillycocoa.org. There you'll find links to our Slack group, meetup schedule, and contact info. If you're feeling generous, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your podcast platform of choice is. And please share us with all your developer friends. And one more thing, more jokes, more programmer dad jokes.
Are these AI generated?
No, but these are human generated, but they're programmer dad jokes, so they're not going to be good. So here we go. Joke number 1. What's a hacker's favorite type of sneaker?
What?
A DDoS.
DDoS. What? A DDoS. I get it. That's funny and awful at the same time.
Joke number 2.
Oh my God.
Why did the 90s website go to jail?
Oh man, I don't know why.
It was framed.
Oh, come on. Frames. That's an HTML joke. That's so awesome and lame at the same time. I can't take it.
All right, last joke.
Oh,
You'll get this one because I didn't get it, but you'll get it, I guess. Why a regular expression does not like one night stands?
Why?
No strings attached.
Oh my God.
I don't know. That was pretty bad. But
anyway. I'm not even sure I get that. I'm trying like one night stands, no strings attached. There's no strings. I mean, like it didn't match. I'm a little unclear about that one too, because regular expressions are unclear. So I guess that makes sense.
Till next time. Good luck on your own developer journey. We will cheer for you always.
Have you used the content unavailable view?
When did they have that? Was that a 17 feature?
Yes.
That's a 16. I think that was a 16 feature. Like, I was surprised when I took a look at it, and I was like, wait a minute, this is not that new, or like new, but not that new. Like,
really? Have you not used it?
I have not used it.
I was using it yesterday.
I'm shocked.
I was using it on Friday. It's great.
I'm disappointed in myself. Like, nobody talked about it.
Okay, so the content unavailable view is. It seems like it really is for full screen use only. It seems like
it is 17.
17, yeah. So you can modify it in different ways, but you can give it like an image, like a SF symbol. You can give it a text. You can give it like a title text, description text, and you can give it an actions to perform. And so you could basically set up a view that is like, oh, an error occurred, and here's a button to reload it. It has some built-in styling. Like if I gave it a button, I was like, okay, here's my reload thing, and it made this little rounded button, and it seems like it's kind of resistant to too much styling, but you can do some stuff with it.
That would make sense. But
yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize it would be so specific.
Oh, you can. So there's a bunch of initializers, so you can get some standard stuff. There's a one for search, one, and then there's one where you could just modify everything, and if you do that, you can give it a separate title, description text, and like actions, and then the actions are just closures to do stuff. So I hooked it up as an error screen that had a reload button, so it would attempt to reload the data from the observable.
So I'm confused by its existence, because it's like, does it exist only in a list view? Like you can only utilize it inside one of those, like a scroll view or a list view. It could be used anywhere.
I think it's more for full screen. I don't even know if it works in a list view. I was thinking about using it in something like a list view, but when I was trying to mess around with positioning of stuff in it, it seemed resistant. So I think all the examples in the documentation are like big screens. Like, the most of the screen is this.
Because I thought the example, at least in the article that I posted that link from, or at least
I read that article on Friday before you posted it.
Has it inside a list?
Does he? Does he have it inside a list? I'll have to check.
I sworn I saw that. Like, it was inside a list, so I was like, oh, maybe it's very specific about.
But no, it's just a view. It's just but it's a view that like really wants to lay itself out in a certain way,
like on like full screen, like whatever, like as large as its parent would allow.
Basically, yeah, that's what it looks like. Oh, and it seems like it really wants to make the buttons rounded, like really rounded.
The buttons are really rounded. Okay, but that's such a funny.
It's a standardized. It's trying to standardize the kinds of empty screens and error screens that you often see. It's convenient instead of writing your own.
It is convenient, no question. It's so specific.
But it is very specific.
They're trying to remove like layout things so visionOS can make giant, ridiculous interfaces. So they're trying to limit you on how you can lay things out.
But it is totally worth using, though, because you can. It's the convenience initializers for a lot of scenarios. You can just put in like some text and an image, and you're done. Or, as I said, it's just a really easy way to get a button up on the screen. And so if you use an observable, and the observable has like a load method, right, that you would call in a task on when the view appears, right? And then something goes wrong, and you don't get any data, for instance, an error, you can put an error up. You can put this up as an error, and then you can have a button in there that attempts to call that load button, that load again from your observable, and then give someone the chance to try it again. So that's actually really useful, and I liked it.
This is one of those like, oh, they must have had days of arguments around this particular this component, because like if it was me building that framework out, I would be very hesitant to put something like that in there, because it's so specific.
So specific.
Yeah, it's like why can't you just put the label and the icon and call it a day, right? Put it inside of View and put it in whatever context you need it to. Why do you need that specific thing?
Well, it's a label and additional content when the content of your app is unavailable. So they're like
you in your mind could construct that in SwiftUI easily, right?
They do say
complicated.
They say a list without items, a search return, no results or network error. So it's like when there's literally nothing to display, what do I put up? And it is weird. It's like did an intern have this as a project or something? Because it's such a weirdly specific thing. You can it's only useful in these. Well, it's useful in these scenarios that come up obviously all the time on almost every view.
Often.
So
to be fair,
you need it when their language model is generating this code automatically, because it needs as many little pieces of things that are pre-done.
This is Apple creating training material for their LLM. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's not training material, but it's a specific step it can do. It's not like, oh, we'll display anything. It's like, no, display this exact view with this image and this description. So
maybe. Anyway,
they're specializing their auto generating code.
I feel like it's one of those ones where that was probably like a private component that they used everywhere, and they're like,
yes, I bet it was. It makes sense because you see that design in modern Apple apps on iOS. So it is it's totally easy to use. There's not much to it. Go and use ContentUnavailableView wherever you have unavailable content, and help the LLMs, help the future Apple LLM, I guess, too, at the same time.